Water rushed through the broken hull like a hungry beast, swallowing everything in its path. Ana Rodriguez pressed her diving mask tighter against her face and kicked harder through the flooded corridors of what used to be their home. The colony, ship Endeavor, had been their transport, their shelter, their future. Now it lay broken on the ocean floor of a world they never meant to visit. The hyperspace jump had gone wrong 3 days ago. One moment they were traveling toward their new colony world. The next they were falling through the atmosphere of an unknown planet, covered entirely in water. Half the ship's sections were flooded, and the other half barely held together above the waves. 237 colonists now lived in emergency shelters on floating platforms, hoping the rescue teams could salvage something useful from the wreck. Ana swam deeper into the ship's belly, following the beam of her underwater light. As the chief engineer, she knew every corridor, every room, every hidden space where something important might be hiding. Her team had already recovered most of the critical equipment from the upper levels. Now they were searching the flooded sections for anything that might help them survive on this endless ocean world. The ship creaked around her, metal groaning under the water's weight. Fish with glowing fins darted past her light, native creatures that had already made the wreck their home. She turned a corner into what used to be Cargo Bay 7 and stopped swimming. Her light had caught something that didn't belong. In the far corner of the flooded bay, tangled in a mess of cargo netting and floating debris, something small moved. At first Ana thought it might be another fish, but the movement was wrong. Too deliberate, too desperate. She swam closer and her heart jumped. The creature was about the size of a house cat, covered in scales that shifted color in her light from deep blue to silver to purple. It had 4 legs, a long tail, and what looked like tiny wings pressed against its back. But what made Ana's breath catch in her throat were its eyes. Large, intelligent eyes that looked directly at her with an expression she recognized. Fear, pain, and something that looked almost like hope. The creature was trapped in the netting, and from the way it moved, Ana could tell it was hurt. One of its small wings hung at an odd angle, and dark fluid leaked from several cuts along its body. Most strange of all, it seemed to be drowning. Even though it was clearly some kind of water creature, with gills that fluttered along its neck, it kept trying to swim upward toward the surface, only to sink back down like a stone. Ana had seen enough injured animals during her childhood on Earth's ocean colonies to recognize suffering. She swam forward slowly, speaking into her underwater communicator even though she knew the creature couldn't understand her words. "Easy there, little one. I'm going to help you." The creature went very still as Ana approached, but it didn't try to swim away. Maybe it was too tired. Maybe it understood somehow that she meant no harm. Ana carefully began cutting through the netting with her emergency knife. Each cut freed another part of the creature's body, and she could see it, relax slightly as the pressure eased. When the last of the netting fell away, the creature didn't swim off. Instead, it floated there in the water, looking at Ana with those remarkable eyes. She noticed that despite having gills, it was struggling to breathe. Something was definitely wrong. Ana made a decision that would change everything for both, her people and this strange little creature. She carefully scooped it up in her arms, surprised by how light it felt, and began swimming toward the surface. The creature didn't fight her. If anything, it seemed to press closer to her as if it knew she was trying to help. Breaking the surface inside one of the ship's air pockets, Ana was amazed to see the creature's breathing ease immediately. Its gills were working, but it seemed to need air as well as water. "What are you?" she whispered, studying the small being in her arms. The creature looked up at her and made a soft sound, almost like a purr mixed with a whistle. Ana felt something she hadn't experienced since the crash: wonder. In all her years as an engineer, traveling between worlds and seeing the strange life forms that existed across the galaxy, she had never encountered anything like this. She activated her communicator. "Peter, Lisa, I need you down here right away and bring the emergency medical kit." Dr. Peter Collins was their xenobiologist, a man who had spent his career studying alien life forms. Lisa Torres was their marine biologist, an expert on water-dwelling creatures. If anyone could help this strange animal, It would be them. While she waited for her colleagues, Anna found herself talking to the creature. It seemed to respond to her voice, turning its head toward her when she spoke and making soft sounds in return. The injured wing was clearly causing it pain, but it bore the discomfort with a patience that seemed almost human. "Where did you come from, little one?" Anna asked, gently stroking the creature's head. Its scales were incredibly soft, not rough like a fish or snake. "How did you end up trapped in our ship?" The creature closed its eyes and leaned into her. Touch. Anna felt a strange connection forming, something she couldn't explain. This wasn't just an animal. There was intelligence here, awareness, maybe even personality. When Peter and Lisa arrived, swimming down through the flooded corridors, with their equipment sealed in waterproof cases, they both stopped and stared at the creature in Anna's arms. "My God," Peter breathed, his voice distorted by his diving equipment. "Anna, do you realize what you found?" "A hurt animal that needs help," Anna replied simply. "No," Peter said, swimming closer to get a better look. "Look at the bone structure, the head shape, the way it's holding itself." "Anna, I think this is a dragon." Lisa laughed, a sound that came out as bubbles in the water. "Dragons are mythology, Peter. Fantasy stories." "Not anymore," Peter said seriously. "Look at those wing structures, the spine configuration, the intelligence in those eyes. This is a juvenile dragon, or something so close to one that the difference doesn't matter." The creature seemed to understand they were talking about it. It looked from one human to another, then settled its gaze on Anna. She felt that strange connection again, stronger this time. "Dragon or not," Anna said, "it's hurt, and it needs help. Can we save it?" Peter and Lisa exchanged glances. They had medical supplies for human injuries, some basic veterinary equipment for the few animals they had brought with them. But treating an unknown alien species, especially one that might be a dragon, was beyond anything they had trained for. "We can try," Lisa said finally, "but we'll need to get it back to the surface station. It needs proper medical attention." As they prepared to transport the creature back to their floating colony, Anna noticed something else. Even though it was clearly aquatic with gills and streamlined features, the little dragon kept trying to move its wings. Not swimming motions, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like it was trying to fly, even underwater. The creature had found them by accident, trapped in their broken ship in the depths of an alien ocean. But as Anna looked into its intelligent eyes, she had the strangest feeling that this meeting was meant to happen. That somehow this small, injured dragon was going to change all their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The small dragon had been living with the human colonists for 3 weeks now, and Dr. Peter Collins was beginning to understand just how little he knew about the creature they had rescued. He sat in the floating research station, watching through the observation window as the dragon attempted once again to navigate the shallow pool they had built for it. The colonists had named the creature Ember, partly because of the way its scales caught the light like glowing coals, and partly because Anna's 12-year-old daughter Beth had insisted that all dragons needed proper names. Beth had appointed herself as Ember's primary caretaker, a role that both worried and amused Peter. The girl had a natural way with animals that even their trained biologists envied. "It's doing it again," Lisa Torres said, joining Peter at the window. She held a tablet filled with notes and observations, data they had been collecting since Ember's arrival. "Watch how it moves." In the pool below, Ember was attempting to swim from one end to the other. The dragon had healed remarkably quickly from its injuries, the damaged wing now properly set and showing signs of mending. But its swimming technique was unlike anything either scientist had seen before. Instead of the smooth, efficient movements of a natural aquatic creature, Ember swam in complex patterns. It would dive down, then spiral upward. It would spread its wings wide and beat them against the water resistance, not to propel itself forward, but as if it was practicing something else entirely. Most puzzling of all, it would often launch, itself partially out of the water, hover for just a moment, then crash back down with what looked like frustration. It's like it's trying to do something the water won't let it do, Peter murmured. Beth thinks it's trying to dance, Lisa said with a smile. She says Ember is just expressing happiness. Peter shook his head. After years of studying alien life forms, he had developed an instinct for behavior that served a purpose beyond simple play. No, this is something else, something important. Down in the pool, Beth had arrived for Ember's daily swimming lesson. The girl had taken to the task with the enthusiasm only a 12-year-old could muster, convinced that she could teach the dragon to be the best swimmer in the colony. She slipped into the water and immediately Ember swam over to her, making the soft purring whistle sound it used to communicate. "Good morning, Ember," Beth said, scratching gently behind the dragon's head fins. "Ready for your lesson?" What followed was a routine that had developed naturally over the past weeks. Beth would demonstrate swimming techniques and Ember would attempt to copy them. But the dragon never quite did things the way Beth showed. Instead, it would take her movements and transform them into something more complex, more three-dimensional. When Beth did a simple backstroke, Ember would flip and roll through the water like it was performing aerial acrobatics. When she showed it how to tread water, Ember would hover in place, wings spread wide as if it was floating on air instead of water. The dragon was learning to swim, but it was learning in a way that no aquatic creature ever had. "You know what I think?" Anna, Rodriguez said, climbing down into the research station. She had been spending more time here lately, fascinated by the creature she had rescued. "I think we're making an assumption that might be wrong." "What do you mean?" Peter asked. Anna pointed to Ember, who was now attempting to teach Beth one of its complex underwater spiral maneuvers. "We found it in water. It has gills, so we assumed it was an aquatic creature. But look at those wings. Look at the way it moves. What if it's not a water dragon at all?" Lisa frowned. "But it can breathe underwater. It has all the adaptations for aquatic life." "So do whales," Anna replied, "and sea turtles, and dozens of other creatures that started as land animals and adapted to water. What if dragons on this world are primarily air creatures? And this little one just happened to fall into the ocean?" The idea was so simple, so obvious, that both scientists felt embarrassed for not considering it earlier. They had been so focused on helping Ember survive in water that they hadn't questioned whether water was where it belonged in the first place. "That would explain the wing movements," Peter said slowly. "It's not swimming like a fish. It's flying like a bird, but underwater. And the way it keeps trying to jump out of the pool," Lisa added, excitement growing in her voice. "It's not playing. It's trying to get airborne." Down in the pool, Beth was laughing as Ember performed another of its impossible underwater aerial displays. The dragon seemed happier in the water than it had been when they first found it. But there was still something in its behavior that suggested it was waiting for something, practicing for something. "The question is," Anna said, "are we helping it or holding it back?" That afternoon, they decided to test their new theory. Instead of the shallow pool, they moved Ember to one of the deeper sections of their floating platform, an area where the water was crystal clear and went down nearly 50 feet. If Ember was truly an aerial creature, the additional depth might allow it more space to practice whatever it was trying to achieve. The change in Ember's behavior was immediate and dramatic. Given more room to maneuver, the dragon began performing elaborate routines that took it from the surface all the way down to the bottom and back up again. It would dive at sharp angles, then suddenly change direction. It would spread its wings and glide through the water as if it were gliding through air. Most remarkably, it began to demonstrate a level of three-dimensional control that no purely aquatic creature could match. Beth, wearing full diving gear now, tried to keep up with her student-turned-teacher. But Ember was moving through the water, with a grace and precision that was almost impossible to follow. The dragon wasn't just swimming anymore. It was performing aerial ballet in an underwater theater. "Look at this," Peter called out, pointing to his tablet. He had been recording Ember's movements and analyzing them with the ship's computer. The computer recognizes these movement patterns. It's comparing them to archived footage of atmospheric flight patterns from various worlds. "You mean it's learning to fly?" Lisa said. No, Peter replied, his voice filled with wonder. It already knows how to fly. What it's learning is precision, control, advanced maneuvering. The water resistance is providing the perfect training environment for developing incredibly refined flight skills. Anna watched Ember execute a perfect spiral dive that ended in a controlled hover just inches from the platform floor. We thought we were teaching it to swim, she said quietly, but it was teaching itself to fly. As the days passed, Ember's aerial skills in water became more and more impressive. The dragon could now hover motionless at any depth, change direction instantly, and perform maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its wings, once seemingly useless appendages, had become instruments of incredible precision. But perhaps, most importantly, Ember was teaching the humans something as well. Beth, inspired by the dragon's three-dimensional thinking, had become an extraordinary swimmer herself. Other children in the colony began joining the lessons, and soon they had developed swimming techniques that incorporated elements of aerial movement. The colonists were learning that their new world required new ways of thinking. On a planet, covered entirely by water, the boundary between swimming and flying might not be as clear as they had always believed. And in their rescued dragon, they had found the perfect teacher for bridging that gap. What none of them realized yet was that high above them, in the thick clouds that perpetually covered their water world, other eyes were watching. Ancient eyes that belonged to creatures who had been flying through these skies for thousands of years. Creatures who had noticed that something unusual was happening in the waters below, something that smelled distinctly of family. 6 months had passed since Ana Rodriguez pulled a dying dragon from the wreckage of their ship, and the floating colony had settled into a rhythm of life that none of them could have imagined. The morning started like any other, with Beth preparing for what had become the most popular attraction on their small platform, Ember's daily training session. The dragon had grown considerably during its time with the humans. No longer the size of a house cat, Ember now measured nearly 4 feet from nose to tail, with a wingspan that stretched almost 6 feet when fully extended. Its scales had deepened, in color, shifting from the pale blues and purples of youth to rich emerald greens shot through with gold. Most remarkably, its injured wing had healed perfectly, showing no sign of the damage that had nearly killed it months ago. But despite its growth and obvious health, Ember remained bound to the water. The dragon had become the most accomplished swimmer any of them had ever seen, capable of underwater maneuvers that defied explanation. Yet every day, Peter Collins watched it practice the same aerial routines beneath the waves and wondered when the breakthrough would come. Beth slipped into the colony's main pool, a large circular tank that had been expanded 3 times to accommodate Ember's growing size and increasingly complex training routines. The dragon immediately swam over to her, greeting her with the musical trill that had become its signature sound. Over the months, Beth had learned to distinguish between Ember's different vocalizations. This particular sound meant happiness and anticipation. "Ready for today's lesson?" Beth asked, though she knew the question was mostly for show. Ember had long since surpassed anything she could teach it about swimming. Their sessions had evolved into something more like a dance between partners, with each pushing the other to try new things. Ember responded by diving to the bottom of the pool and launching itself upward in a spiral that brought it nearly to the surface before it dove again. The movement was so fluid, so perfect, that several colonists who had been walking past stopped to watch. Even after 6 months, Ember's underwater performances still drew crowds. What happened next would be talked about in the colony for years to come. Beth had just begun her own warm-up routine when Ember suddenly stopped swimming. The dragon hung, motionless in the center of the pool, wings spread wide, head tilted upward toward the surface. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then Ember began to rise. It wasn't swimming upward. It wasn't using its legs to push off from the pool bottom. The dragon was simply ascending through the water with its wings spread, as if the water itself was lifting it up. Beth stared in amazement as Ember broke the surface of the pool and kept going. For the first time since arriving at the colony, the dragon was airborne. But this wasn't the clumsy, desperate attempt at flight they had seen during its early days. Ember flew with the same precision and control it had developed underwater. It circled the pool once, twice, 3 times, banking and turning with movements that were both powerful and graceful. The entire colony seemed to freeze. Work stopped. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Children pressed their faces against windows. Adults stood with their mouths open, watching a small dragon prove that the impossible was merely improbable. Ember's flight lasted only about 30 seconds before it landed gently on the pool's edge, but those 30 seconds changed everything. The dragon looked around at the stunned humans and trilled again, this time with a note they had never heard before. Pure, unmistakable triumph. Beth was the first to recover from the shock. She pulled herself out of the pool and approached Ember slowly, as if sudden movements might break the spell. "You can fly," she whispered. "You really can fly." Peter Collins came running from his research station, followed closely by Lisa Torres and Ana Rodriguez. The 3 scientists had been monitoring the session through their instruments, but nothing could have prepared them for what they had just witnessed. "The readings are incredible," Peter said, checking his tablet with shaking hands. "Look at this wing efficiency data. Look at the power-to-weight ratios. Ember isn't just flying. It's flying better than it should be possible for a creature of its size." "The swimming," Lisa said suddenly, understanding flooding her voice. "All those months of swimming against water resistance. It was building muscle strength and control that no land-based creature could ever develop." Anna knelt beside Ember and gently stroked the dragon's head. "You've been training yourself this whole time, haven't you? Using the water like a gymnasium." Ember seemed to understand the praise. It spread its wings wide, showing off the powerful muscles that had developed during months of underwater flight training. The wings that had once seemed too small for its body now looked perfectly proportioned, every membrane and bone and muscle working in harmony. "Try again," Beth urged. "Show us it wasn't just luck." Ember needed no further encouragement. This time it took off directly from the pool's edge, launching itself into the air with a confidence that spoke of countless hours of preparation. It flew higher this time, circling the entire platform and giving every colonist a clear view of their miraculous resident. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated how much Ember had learned from its human teachers. Instead of simply flying around randomly, the dragon began to perform aerial versions of the swimming routines Beth had taught it months ago. It executed perfect barrel rolls, steep climbs followed by controlled dives and hovering maneuvers that seemed to ignore gravity entirely. "It's showing off," Beth laughed, clapping her hands as Ember performed an elaborate figure-8 pattern above the platform. "No," Anna said, watching the dragon's performance with growing amazement. "It's teaching. Look around." She was right. Every human on the platform was watching Ember's demonstration with intense focus, unconsciously learning about 3-dimensional movement and spatial relationships. The dragon was sharing its hard-won knowledge the same way the humans had shared their swimming techniques. When Ember finally landed back at the pool, it wasn't tired or winded as they had expected. The months of resistance training in water had given it stamina that pure aerial practice never could have developed. The dragon looked like it could fly for hours without rest. But instead of taking off again immediately, Ember did something that surprised everyone. It slipped back into the water and began its familiar swimming routine, as if to demonstrate that it hadn't abandoned its aquatic skills. If anything, its swimming seemed even more graceful now, informed by the freedom of actual flight. "I think I understand," Peter said slowly. "Most flying creatures are either aerial or terrestrial, with limited ability in water. Most aquatic creatures are either swimmers or land dwellers with no aerial capability. But Ember has become something new. It's truly amphibious in 3 dimensions. Over the following days, Ember's flying abilities continued to improve at a remarkable rate. The dragon seemed to be making up for months of grounded existence by spending every possible moment in the air. But it never abandoned its swimming practice, treating the pool as a training ground for perfecting maneuvers before attempting them in the air. The colonists found themselves learning alongside their dragon companion. Beth and the other children began incorporating Ember's 3-dimensional thinking into their own swimming, developing techniques that would have been impossible without the dragon's example. The adults started looking at their floating platform differently, seeing it not just as a place to live, but as a base for true three-dimensional exploration. But perhaps most importantly, Ember's breakthrough had proven something fundamental about both dragons and humans. Given time, patience, and the right training environment, any creature could exceed the limitations others placed on it. The dragon that had nearly drowned because it couldn't fly had taught itself to become a master of both air and water. As Ember performed another perfect aerial routine above the platform, circling back to land gracefully at Beth's feet, Anna realized that their rescue mission 6 months ago had accomplished something far greater than saving one small creature. They had discovered a new kind of partnership, one that transcended the boundaries between species and elements. What none of them knew yet was that Ember's aerial displays had not gone unnoticed. High above the clouds, ancient eyes were watching their lost child with growing interest. The sky dragons of Aquatica Prime had thought their youngest clan member was dead, lost to the depths months ago during a fierce territorial battle. But now they could see something that filled them with both pride and amazement. Their little one had not just survived. It had evolved into something unprecedented, a dragon that ruled both sky and sea. And soon, very soon, they would come to investigate this miracle for themselves. The massive shadow fell across the floating colony just before noon, blotting out the sun so completely that emergency lights automatically activated across the platform. Ana Rodriguez looked up from her engineering reports to see something that made her heart stop. Above them, descending through the clouds with wings that seemed to span half the sky, came creatures that could only be Ember's family. There were 5 of them, each easily 10 times Ember's size, their scales ranging from deep copper to brilliant silver. They moved with the same fluid grace that Ember had developed, but on a scale that spoke of centuries of mastery. These were the Sky Lords of Aquatica Prime, and they had come to investigate the strange reports their scouts had brought them. The colonists reacted with a mixture of awe and terror. Children pressed against windows while adults reached instinctively for weapons they didn't have. The floating platform, which had felt secure and permanent just moments before, now seemed impossibly small and fragile beneath the approaching giants. But Ember's reaction was entirely different. The young dragon, who had been practicing aerial maneuvers above the platform, suddenly changed direction and flew directly toward the descending giants. Its musical trill, normally soft and pleasant, became a powerful call that echoed across the water. The lead dragon, a magnificent creature with scales that shifted from gold to bronze in the sunlight, responded with a deeper version of the same call. The sound was so powerful it made the platform's metal structure vibrate. Then something wonderful happened. The giant dragon's stern expression softened into what could only be described as relief and joy. Peter Collins, watching through his research station's reinforced windows, realized he was witnessing a family reunion. "That big one," he said to Lisa, who had joined him at the observation deck. "Look at how it's responding to Ember. That's not predator behavior, that's parental behavior." The 5 adult dragons landed on the ocean surface around the platform, their massive wings creating waves that rocked the human settlement. But they were careful, Anna noticed. Despite their size and obvious power, they positioned themselves so their wing beats wouldn't damage the fragile human structures. Ember flew directly to the largest dragon and hovered just in front of its enormous head. The 2 creatures touched nose to nose in a gesture so tender that several colonists found themselves wiping away tears. Then Ember began what could only be described as an enthusiastic explanation, flying in rapid circles around the adult dragon, while vocalizing in a series of trills, chirps, and calls. Beth, who had formed the strongest bond with Ember, was the first human brave enough to approach the water's edge. "Ember," she called softly, "are these your parents?" The young dragon immediately flew back to the platform and landed beside Beth, then looked back at the adult dragons as if making introductions. The largest dragon, clearly the leader of the group, studied Beth with eyes that held ancient intelligence. When it spoke, its voice was like controlled thunder. The words were not in any human language, but somehow Beth understood the meaning. The dragon was asking about its child. How had the small one survived? Why did it smell of strange creatures? And most importantly, what had happened to make it capable of things no dragon had ever done before? Ember responded by diving into the colony's main pool and demonstrating the swimming techniques Beth had taught it. The adult dragons watched in amazement as their young relative moved through water with the same skill it showed in air. When Ember surfaced and took flight again, seamlessly transitioning from swimming to flying, the adults exchanged looks of pure astonishment. The leader dragon, whom Anna had begun thinking of as Gale because of the wind that seemed to follow its movements, slowly approached the platform. When it spoke again, the meaning was clearer somehow, as if the dragon was learning to communicate with the strange creatures who had saved its child. "You taught the small one to swim," the mental voice seemed to say. "But how did this lead to better flying?" Dr. Collins, surprising himself with his own courage, stepped forward. "The water provided resistance training," he said aloud, hoping the dragon could understand. "Ember used swimming to build strength and perfect control. 6 months of practice in water made it a better flyer than years of practice in air alone." Gale tilted its massive head considering this explanation. Then it did something unprecedented. The giant dragon slipped into the ocean and attempted to swim. The result was immediately obvious to everyone watching. Despite being a creature of the air for possibly centuries, Gale was a terrible swimmer. Its movements were clumsy and inefficient, nothing like the graceful control it showed in flight. After a few moments of struggling, the dragon surfaced and looked at Ember with something approaching embarrassment. Ember responded by diving back into the water and slowly, patiently, demonstrating the basic swimming techniques Beth had taught months ago. The sight of a small dragon teaching a giant one how to move through water was so absurd that several colonists began laughing despite their fear. But Gale was a serious student. The ancient dragon spent the next hour learning from its child, gradually improving its swimming technique. The other adult dragons joined in, turning the ocean around the platform into an impromptu swimming school. As the day progressed, something remarkable began to happen. The adult dragons started to understand what the humans had given their lost child. Not just rescue from drowning, but a completely new way of thinking about movement and control. The swimming lessons had created abilities that no purely aerial dragon possessed. Gale eventually pulled itself partially onto the platform, careful not to damage the structure with its weight. When it spoke this time, the human colonists could understand more of its meaning. "Our people have ruled the skies of this world for 1,000 generations," the dragon conveyed, "but we have never been able to reach the rich hunting grounds, beneath the waves. The deep fish, the creatures that live in underwater caves, all of this has been beyond our reach." Anna began to see where this was leading. "But now you have a dragon who can hunt in both places." "More than that," Gale replied, its ancient eyes gleaming with possibilities. "You have shown us that our old limitations were not real, that with proper training and new thinking, even the most impossible things become possible." The other adult dragons had gathered around the platform now, all of them listening intently to the conversation between their leader and the human engineer. Ember flew between the groups, clearly excited to be reuniting its two families. "What do you want from us?" Lisa asked, stepping up beside Anna. Gale's response surprised everyone. "We want to learn. Our youngest has become something new, something better than what we thought possible. We want to understand how this happened, so that other young ones might benefit from this knowledge." Peter Collins felt his scientific mind racing with possibilities. "You're talking about a cultural exchange. Dragons learning human teaching methods, humans learning about aerial mastery." "More than learning," Gale said. "Partnership. This world is changing. The old ways of hunting and living may not be enough for much longer, but together, sky people and swimming people, we might create something that can thrive in any environment." Beth, who had been quietly watching Ember interact with its family, suddenly spoke up. "Will you take Ember away from us?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The adult dragons looked at each other, then at Ember, then at the small, human girl who had been their child's first swimming teacher. "The small one belongs to both worlds now," Gale said finally. "Taking it away would be like cutting off one of its wings. It needs Sky Family and Water Family to be complete. Ember landed beside Beth and nuzzled her hand, then looked up at Gale with an expression that clearly said the young dragon agreed completely with this assessment. As the sun began to set over the endless ocean, the foundation was laid for something unprecedented in the history of both species. The dragons would establish a permanent presence near the human colony, and the humans would help train young dragons in aquatic skills. In return, the dragons would share their knowledge of aerial navigation, weather prediction, and the hidden secrets of their water world. It was a partnership born from one small dragon's swimming lessons, but it would grow into something that changed the destiny of both peoples. The sky and the sea, long separated by an invisible barrier, were finally coming together. 2 years had passed since the first adult dragons descended from the clouds to reclaim their lost child, and the floating colony had transformed into something that defied every assumption both species had held about their respective worlds. What had once been a desperate human settlement clinging to survival had become the first truly integrated sky-sea civilization in the recorded history of Aquatica Prime. Beth Rodriguez stood on the edge of what everyone now called the Great Platform, watching her student prepare for the morning lesson. But today her student was not Ember. Instead, a young dragon named Ripple, barely larger than Ember had been 2 years ago, floated nervously in the expanded training pool. This was Ripple's first official swimming lesson, and the little dragon was clearly terrified of the water. "It's okay," Beth said softly, her voice carrying the confidence that came from teaching dozens of young dragons over the past months. "Remember what Ember showed you yesterday? The water isn't your enemy. It's just another kind of sky." Ripple made a worried chirping sound and looked toward the sky, where Ember was demonstrating advanced aerial maneuvers to a group of human teenagers. At 2.5 years old, Ember had grown into a magnificent dragon, though still smaller than the ancient adults. What made Ember truly special wasn't size, but versatility. It remained the only dragon capable of seamless transition between air and water, a living bridge between two worlds. Beth slipped into the pool and extended her hand toward Ripple. Over the past 2 years, she had learned to read dragon body language as easily as human expressions. Ripple was afraid, but also eager to learn. The young dragon had seen the advantages Ember possessed and wanted those same abilities. "Trust me," Beth said, the same words she had spoken to Ember so long ago. "I won't let you drown." Ripple slowly entered the water, wings pressed tightly against its body. The first few minutes were always difficult with new students. Dragons were creatures of air and fire, and water represented everything foreign to their nature. But Beth had learned patience from Ember, and she knew that fear could be overcome with gentle persistence. Above them, construction crews were putting finishing touches on the newest addition to the colony. The Sky Harbor, as they called it, was a marvel of human engineering and dragon wisdom. The structure rose nearly 200 feet into the air, providing landing platforms for dragons of all sizes while connecting seamlessly to the underwater sections where humans lived and worked. Ana Rodriguez, now serving as the colony's chief administrator, watched the construction with satisfaction. The past 2 years had been filled with challenges that no human settlement had ever faced, but also with discoveries that had revolutionized both species' understanding of their world. The dragons had taught them about the complex weather patterns of Aquatica Prime, allowing the humans to predict storms and atmospheric changes with unprecedented accuracy. In return, human engineering had helped the dragons create permanent structures that could withstand both aerial and aquatic conditions. Together, they had built something neither species could have imagined alone. "The morning report, Administrator," said David, one of her assistants, approaching with a tablet full of data. The young man had been barely 14 when they crashed on this world, but he had grown into one of their most capable organizers. Anna scanned the information. Food production from their underwater farms was up 15% thanks to dragon-guided, deep-sea harvesting. Weather prediction accuracy had reached 97% using combined human instruments and dragon sensory abilities. Most importantly, the integration success rate for new dragon students in aquatic training was now over 80%. "And the expansion project?" Anna asked. "The dragons finished the underwater city section yesterday," David replied with excitement. Gale says they're ready to start the deep-sea research facility next month. Anna nodded, still amazed by how much their world had changed. The adult dragons had proven to be remarkably adaptable partners. Gale, in particular, had embraced human methods with enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. The ancient dragon had spent months learning to swim and had eventually developed aquatic skills that rivaled those of much younger dragons. Down in the Ide training pool, Beth was celebrating a small victory. Ripple had successfully completed its first underwater glide, moving from one end of the pool to the other without panicking. The young dragon surfaced with its eyes bright with accomplishment, making the musical trill that all dragons use to express joy. "Excellent," Beth praised. "Tomorrow we'll work on diving techniques." Ember, having finished the aerial lesson, descended to land at the pool's edge. The older dragon immediately began encouraging Ripple with a series of gentle chirps and calls. Over the years, Ember had become not just a bridge between species, but a teacher for its own kind, passing on the swimming knowledge it had learned from humans. Dr. Peter Collins joined Anna at the observation deck, carrying his latest research findings. The xenobiologist had spent the past 2 years documenting the unprecedented biological adaptations occurring in both species. Dragons were developing better lung capacity for underwater work, while humans living in the integrated colony were showing improved three-dimensional spatial reasoning skills. "The children born here are remarkable," Peter told Anna, showing her his latest data. "The human children who've grown up learning alongside young dragons show cognitive abilities we've never seen before, and the dragon hatchlings who learn swimming from birth are developing physical capabilities that exceed even Ember's achievements." Anna studied the data with fascination. The partnership wasn't just changing how they lived. It was changing who they were as species. Children like Beth, who had grown up with Ember, thought in ways that incorporated both human logic and dragon intuition. Young dragons like Ripple were developing hybrid abilities that combined the best aspects of both, aerial and aquatic mastery. "We're witnessing evolution in real time," Peter continued. "Not biological evolution, but something even more remarkable. Cultural and cognitive evolution happening within a single generation." The afternoon brought one of Anna's favorite events, the community meeting where both humans and dragons discussed colony business. These gatherings had taken months to develop, requiring the creation of translation protocols and communication methods that worked for both species. Gale lowered its great head to speak directly to the assembled colonists. Over time, the ancient dragon had learned to project thoughts in ways humans could easily understand, while the humans had learned to interpret the complex vocalizations and body language of dragon communication. "The Deep Scouts have returned with news," Gale announced, referring to the dragons who had been exploring the far reaches of their ocean world. "They have found other survivors." A murmur of excitement ran through the human colonists. For 2 years, they had assumed they were the only humans on Aquatica Prime. The possibility of other survivors had always existed, but no one had dared hope. "Where?" Anna asked. 3 days' flight to the eastern waters," Gale replied. "A smaller group, perhaps 50 of your people. They live on a chain of small islands struggling to grow food and find fresh water. Can we help them?" Beth asked, looking up from where she sat with Ember and Ripple. Gale's expression conveyed both affection and pride when it looked at the young human who had started their entire partnership. "We can do more than help them. We can offer them what we have built here, a true home." The rescue mission launched a week later, with dragons carrying human diplomats and supplies to contact the isolated survivors. What they found was exactly what Anna had expected: a desperate group of humans barely surviving on limited resources, convinced they were alone in the universe. The negotiations took several days, but eventually the isolated colonists agreed to relocate to the integrated settlement. Most were motivated by practical concerns: better food, safer shelter, advanced medical care. But some, particularly the children, were drawn by something else entirely: the chance to live in a world where the impossible had become routine. When the refugees arrived at the Great Platform, their reactions ranged from terror to wonder. Many had never seen a dragon up close, and the sight of massive flying creatures working alongside humans challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. But it was the sight of Beth teaching young dragons to swim, while Ember taught human children advanced aerial theory that truly convinced them they had found something special. Here was proof that the boundaries between species, between elements, between possibilities themselves were far more flexible than anyone had imagined. As the sun set on their expanded community, Anna stood on the highest platform watching dragons and humans work together to build tomorrow's additions to their growing city. Children of both species played together in pools that connected seamlessly to aerial platforms. Adults collaborated on projects that combined human ingenuity with dragon wisdom. Ember landed beside her, now grown large enough that Anna could comfortably sit against its side. The dragon that had once nearly drowned in their crashed ship had become the symbol of everything their community represented: adaptation, cooperation, and the power of learning from unexpected teachers. "Thank you," Anna said quietly, scratching behind Ember's head fins, "for showing us that swimming lessons could teach anyone to fly." Ember responded with its characteristic musical trill, but this time the sound was joined by dozens of other voices. Young dragons learning to swim, human children practicing dragon calls, adults of both species working together on projects that would have been impossible alone. They had crashed on this world as refugees, convinced they had lost everything. Instead, they had discovered that losing everything sometimes meant gaining the freedom to build something entirely new. The baby dragon that learned to fly through swimming lessons had taught them all that the most important skill wasn't adaptation to circumstances, but the courage to help others exceed the limitations they placed on themselves. In the end, that had made all the difference.